Ben Carter used to think that being the steady one, the quiet, reliable son, would eventually earn him a place in his parents' hearts. Now, at 36, he's stopped holding his breath. It's a cold December morning in Bend, Oregon, and he's in the kitchen, packing lunches for his daughters while his wife, Lena, gets ready for school. The house is warm, loud with the ordinary joy of a weekday rush, but Ben's mind is elsewhere, on the upcoming visit to Portland, to the parents who always seemed more comfortable with distance than closeness. He's already bracing himself for the stiff greetings, the way his mother talks to him like a polite coworker, and how his father only ever asks about Lena's school or Julia's latest PR campaign, never Ben's own life. Still, he keeps making the trip, keeps calling once a week, keeps sending money when asked, not because he's weak, but because he was raised to believe that love was shown through duty. But something has been shifting lately. It's not just fatigue, it's recognition that maybe the distance he feels isn't temporary, maybe it's deliberate, and this year, something about the silence is heavier than usual. This year, something's going to give. Ben's childhood wasn't cruel, it was calculated. His parents, Ronald and Elaine Carter, weren't the yelling type. They were organized, composed, and emotionally locked down. They kept a pristine home and ran their lives like a calendar efficiency, quiet and cold. Affection came in the form of balanced meals and strict bedtimes, never hugs or praise his mouth tighten, and that excitement made his father clear his throat and leave the room. He stopped asking for bedtime stories by age 7. He stopped bringing home finger paintings by 3rd grade. It just didn't feel worth the blank stares. His sister Julia, 5 years younger and effortlessly charming, was a different story. She sparkled, she danced in the living room and told stories that made their father laugh. Elaine bought her dresses in every pastel and signed her up for ballet lessons before she could tie her shoes. When Julia got a B in math, it was shrugged off with a, well, she's more creative. When Ben got the same grade, he was told to apply himself. He didn't resent Julia, at least not then. He just assumed he had a different role. He was the stable one, the fixer, the helper, the one who didn't need much. He carried that identity into adulthood like a second skin, always staying useful, always making it easy to be overlooked. It wasn't until years later, after college and marriage and the birth of his first daughter, that he began to notice the weight of it, how his parents never asked how he was really doing, how they lit up at Julia's every update but forgot his wife's name on a holiday card. And still, he kept showing up because that's what good sons do, right? They stay steady, they don't stir the water, they keep hoping quietly that someday someone will notice how much they've given, and for a long time, that hope was enough to keep Ben tethered. But recently, the silence in those family visits has started to sound like something else. Not indifference, but exclusion. At home, Ben's world looks nothing like the one he came from. His house is a bit chaotic, shoe piles by the door, art projects taped to the fridge, and half-finished puzzles on the dining table, but it feels alive. Lena, his wife, is a middle school teacher who somehow still has energy left at the end of the day to dance around the kitchen with their girls, Ivy and Nora. Their daughters, ages 9 and 6, are thoughtful and funny, always asking questions and telling stories that Ben never tires of hearing. He listens to them, not out of obligation, but because he wants to. Their home runs on small joys, pancakes on Sunday mornings, blanket forts in the living room, laughter echoing down the hallway. Lena often tells Ben how different he is from the man she first met years ago, how much heavier he seems after every visit to his parents. She notices the way he withdraws, the way his shoulders tense when he checks his phone and sees a message from his mother. Ben shrugs it off most of the time, but he knows better now. His girls run to him with paint-stained fingers and wild, beautiful stories, and all he can think about is how he was trained not to take up space. In this house, with these people, he's trying to unlearn that. And every time his daughters laugh, like they expect to be heard, he knows it's working. The weekend before Christmas, Ben and Lena loaded the car with gifts, a tray of homemade cinnamon rolls, and the photo calendar he had spent hours putting together. Ivy and Nora were bundled in matching scarves, giddy about seeing their grandparents. The drive to Portland was quiet, but hopeful. Ben tried not to overthink it. Maybe this visit would be different. Maybe this time they'd be welcomed, not just accommodated. But the moment they pulled up to his parents' driveway and saw Julia's BMW already parked outside, something in Ben sank. He hadn't known she'd be there. Inside, the house was decked out with silver garlands and white twinkle lights, elegant, curated, cold. Julia's voice carried from the living room, mid-story about a weekend in Napa, her hands wrapped around a mug of imported cocoa, laughing with Ron about wine labels. Elaine greeted them at the door with a quick, "Oh, you made it," barely making eye contact. No one stood. No one said, "We were waiting for you." Ivy and Nora hovered by the entryway, unsure where to go. Lena smiled and hung up their coats. Ben offered the cinnamon rolls and the calendar. Elaine barely looked at the tray. "Oh, we already have dessert," she said. As for the calendar, she glanced at the cover before setting it face down on the side table as if it were a coupon flyer. Meanwhile, Julia handed out expensive gift bags to everyone, and Ron clapped at the sleek new tablet Julia's son unwrapped. Ivy gave her grandmother a paper ornament she made at school, which Elaine took without a word and placed on the far end of the tree. Max's voice boomed through the room. Lena leaned toward Ben and whispered, "Is it always like this?" He nodded once, jaw tight. For an hour, they sat in the swirl of someone else's celebration. Julia dominated the conversation. Their parents beamed at her. Ben tried to chime in once about Nora's school project, but Elaine cut him off to ask Julia about a marketing award. The girls eventually sat near the hallway, playing quietly by themselves. No one noticed when they left early, except Ivy, who tugged Ben's sleeve in the car and asked, "Did Grandma not like my ornament?" Ben stared out the windshield, the driveway shrinking behind him. "It's not you, sweetie," he said softly. "It's just not us." 3 days after the visit, as the sting of indifference still lingered, Ben received a message from his mother. It was brief and worded with practiced politeness, almost casual. "Hi, Ben. Hope the girls are settling back into school. Your dad's dental work is going to be more than expected. We're a little short at the moment. If you're able to help." This wasn't new. Over the years, there had been similar messages: help with car repairs, a vet bill, a leaky roof, always softened with polite disclaimers, always directed at him, never Julia. And Ben always said yes, transferring money without hesitation, not because he had plenty, he didn't, but because saying no felt like failure. He showed Lena the message, and she read it silently before setting the phone down. "Are you going to help?" she asked, gently. "I don't know," Ben said, though he already did. That night, after the kids were asleep, he sent over $1,200, 0 cents from their savings, and followed it with a short text. "Hope this helps. Let me know if you need anything else." The reply came within the hour. "You're a blessing. Thank you, Ben. No mention of Christmas, no follow-up about the girls, just another withdrawal dressed as gratitude." And still, some part of him hoped it meant they'd finally see him for who he was, not just when they needed something. A week before Christmas, Ben called his mother to confirm their plans for the holiday. He suggested arriving early on the 24th and staying until the 26th, like they had every year since Ivy was born. He mentioned bringing Lena's cranberry tart, the cinnamon rolls again, and the photo calendar for everyone to flip through. There was a pause on the other end of the line, too long. Then Elaine responded with an overly careful tone. "Actually, Ben, Julia, and Max are bringing a couple they vacationed with in Aspen. With all the kids and everyone staying over, The house will be a bit full this year. Ben blinked at the phone. So we're not coming, he asked, keeping his voice level. It's just, it would be so cramped, she said, half laughing. We'd be sleeping people in the study already. You understand, Ben forced out a breath. Right, sure. She filled the silence with something about possibly doing something in January, just us. When the call ended, Ben sat on the edge of the couch, the hum of the Christmas tree lights filling the quiet. Lena walked in with wrapping paper tucked under her arm. Everything good? She asked. He shook his head once. They said, there's no room. Julia's friends are staying. Lena didn't speak right away. She just set the wrapping paper down and sat beside him. The kids were in the other room making paper snowflakes. Did they forget we were coming? She asked. No, Ben said. They didn't forget, they just didn't consider us. On Christmas Eve, the living room was quieter than usual. No suitcase by the door, no road trip playlist. Ivy asked, Are we still going to Grandma and Grandpa's? Ben crouched beside her, heart heavy. Not this year, honey. It's going to be a little different. She frowned, but didn't argue. That night, Ben placed the wrapped photo calendar back on the shelf. He had spent hours picking out those pictures. Birthday cakes, muddy hikes, sleepy-eyed mornings. It wasn't just a gift. It was proof of the life he'd built. A life that mattered, even if his parents didn't want to see it. Later, when the house was quiet, he sat by the tree and stared at the lights until they blurred, not angry, just hollow. Something had been cracked open that couldn't be put back. This wasn't about space in a house. It was about space in their lives. And there simply wasn't any left for him. 2 days after Christmas, as Ben was beginning to settle into the quiet of his own home, his phone buzzed again. Another message from his mother. This time, it was about an adjustable recliner she said Ronald needed for his back. Something orthopedic, she wrote, to help him sit more comfortably during the day. It was on sale, she added. Just a small contribution would help. Ben stared at the message, the words echoing all the previous asks, but this one hit different. He hadn't recovered from being shut out of Christmas. His daughters were still asking about when they'd see their grandparents. The house was still filled with wrapped gifts meant for people who'd made no space for them. This time, instead of silently opening the banking app, Ben picked up the phone. Elaine answered almost immediately, her tone overly chipper. Ben, I wasn't sure if you'd call. We've just been so busy. He didn't waste time. You want me to pay for Dad's chair? A pause. Only if you can. You know we wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Ben's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now. I already sent money 2 weeks ago. You didn't even invite us for Christmas. Her voice cooled instantly. I told you, the house was full. With Julia's friends, he replied. We weren't even a consideration. The silence that followed said everything. Then she sighed, defensive now. Ben, don't take everything so personally. Julia brings joy when she visits. You bring tension. You always have. The words hit harder than she probably intended. You love her family more, Ben said, his voice quieter now. Yes, she said after a beat. They're easier, lighter. They don't make things so hard. Ben let the silence stretch before speaking again. Do you ask Julia for money? Of course not. She and Max have enough going on, and we don't want to burden them. Ben closed his eyes. But it's fine to burden me. Her voice sharpened. We helped you through college. You owe us more than you seem to remember. That was it, the sentence that snapped the last string. I don't owe you my peace, he said. Then he hung up. He didn't call Lena into the room. He didn't explain. He just sat there, heart pounding, and finally understood that this was never going to change, unless he did. Ben didn't make a grand announcement. He didn't send a long message or draft a final goodbye. That night, after putting Ivy and Nora to bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a mug of cold tea and quietly opened his banking app. He found the automatic monthly transfer he'd been sending to his parents for nearly 4 years, money they never thanked him for, money that always felt expected rather than appreciated, just like that. No notification sent, no warning, just a clean stop. Lena walked into the kitchen as he set his phone down, and though he didn't say anything, she saw the decision in his face. She wrapped her arms around him from behind and said softly, "Good. I've been waiting for you to do that." On Christmas Day, their home was still and full in a new way. They didn't go anywhere, no long drives, no strained conversations, just cinnamon rolls and pajamas, messy gift wrap underfoot, and a paper crown on Ben's head, courtesy of Nora's homemade cracker. Ivy curled up next to him on the couch and whispered, "I like Christmas here better." He didn't respond right away. He just pulled her closer. For the first time in years, the day didn't end with him feeling small. There was no lingering guilt, no ache for approval that never came, just peace. And as the girls giggled in the living room and Lena played carols on the old Bluetooth speaker, Ben realized he hadn't been excluded this year. He'd been freed. The silence didn't last long. Just after New Year's, the messages started not from Elaine or Ronald, but from the people around them. First came a text from Aunt Denise. "Your mother says you've been distant. She's heartbroken. Family matters, Ben." Then a call from his cousin Ellie, who hadn't reached out in over a year. "Just checking in," she said, before quickly steering the conversation toward his mother's feelings. "You know, she did her best. Maybe it's time to let it go. Life's too short." Ben listened, polite but unmoved. He recognized the tactic. His parents didn't want to apologize, didn't want a conversation. They wanted compliance. So they sent messengers to gently twist the knife, to push just enough guilt to make him question his own boundaries. When a handwritten letter finally arrived, no return address, no warmth, Ben didn't even need to open it to know who it was from. The script was his mother's. Inside, it read like a contract disguised as sentiment. "We don't understand why you're choosing to estrange yourself from your family. We've given you everything. You may not like how we live or who we spend time with, but that's not your place to judge. You have responsibilities to us, Ben. You are our son. That still means something." There was no mention of Lena, Ivy, or Nora, no recognition of the holiday exclusion, no regret, just a demand for continued access dressed up as tradition. Ben folded the letter once, placed it in the back of a drawer with old utility bills, and shut it without a word. For once, he felt no need to defend himself. It wasn't until mid-February that Elaine called again, directly, not through someone else. Her name flashed on Ben's screen as he stood on the porch, watching Ivy and Nora build a snowman with Lena. He let it ring once, twice. On the third, he answered. "It's been a while," she said, her voice clipped but measured. "Yes," Ben replied, calm. "It has." She launched in without pretense. "You didn't call for New Year's?" "No," he said. "And you didn't respond to my letter?" "I read it," Ben said. "There wasn't much to respond to." There was a long pause before she shifted gears. "Your father's been having some health issues. We may need help with a few medical bills." Ben didn't say anything. Elaine filled the silence. "Also, there's been confusion in the family. People are asking what happened to you, why you've turned on us." "I haven't turned on anyone," Ben said. "I've just stopped pretending everything's fine." That drew a sigh. "You've always been dramatic." "No," he said evenly. "I've always been quiet. That's different." She tried again. "You're our son. You owe us at least a conversation." "You're getting one now," he replied. "But I'm not sending money. Not anymore. And I'm not offering up parts of myself in exchange for being tolerated." "That's how you see it?" she said, sharp. "It's how it is," he answered. "I want peace, and I want my daughters to grow up never questioning whether they're enough." Another silence. "You're making a mistake," she said finally. "No," Ben said, voice steady. "I'm correcting one." He hung up. "No drama. No raised voice, just a clean end. Then he stepped off the porch, back into the snow, where Lena and the girls were laughing, and felt something shift inside him, like closing a door that had been rattling in the wind for years. The weeks that followed felt like early spring, still cold, but slowly brightening. Ben didn't announce anything. He just made quiet changes. He blocked his parents' numbers, then Julia's, not out of spite, but necessity. Their voices, their expectations, their guilt. He no longer had space for any of it. He didn't explain. He didn't apologize. He just stepped away. Lena noticed the difference first. "You're sleeping better," she said one morning as they stood in the kitchen, watching the girls chase each other in mismatched pajamas. Ben smiled, kissed her cheek, and stirred oatmeal for Ivy and Nora without a nut in his chest. He started taking on new clients, only the ones he liked, on his terms. He repainted the hallway a warm yellow. He bought fresh flowers for the kitchen table without waiting for an occasion. One afternoon in March, he got an email from Julia. No subject, just, "Hey, can we talk? It's not about Mom." Out of curiosity, he agreed on his turf park near home, public, neutral. Julia showed up in a tailored coat and designer boots, but there was a hesitance in her voice that hadn't been there before. "Mom's still upset," she said. Ben just nodded. "But she's not calling anymore." "Good," he said. She got the message. Julia looked away. "They never ask me for money," she admitted. "They never have." "I know," Ben replied. He didn't need to say more. She looked at him carefully. "You look better," she added. "Lighter." "I am," he said simply. Then he stood up, gave her a nod, and walked away without looking back. That evening, as he tucked the girls into bed, Ivy whispered, "I liked Christmas at home. Can we do it like that again?" Ben smiled. "Every time," he said. And he meant it. The story of Ben Carter is a quiet, powerful reminder that love isn't something we have to earn through sacrifice, silence, or self-erasure. Sometimes the people we try hardest to please are the ones least capable of giving us the validation we deserve. Ben's journey teaches us that setting boundaries isn't an act of cruelty, it's an act of survival. Choosing peace, choosing the family you build over the one that wounds you, is not weakness, it's clarity. The moment Ben stopped chasing acceptance, he found something better. A home filled with real love, laughter, and self-respect. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, or questioned whether you're too sensitive for noticing the imbalance, this story is for you. You are not too much, you are enough. If this resonated with you, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need the reminder. Your voice matters, and you never know who's waiting to hear that they're not alone. Let's keep telling the stories that need to be told.